Don't sit next to me. Those 5 words destroyed me more than 40 years of exhausting work ever could. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a single second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. My name is Evelyn Miller. I am 69 years old, and I was born in a working-class neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. I spent 42 years as a nurse at Cleveland General Hospital, caring for strangers with more tenderness than I would later receive from my own flesh and blood. My hands learned to change bandages, to hold the heads of the dying, to comfort mothers who lost their children. But no one ever taught me how to protect myself from the very people I brought into this world. I was a single mother since Ethan, my youngest, was just 6 years old. His father left us one November dawn, without a goodbye, without a note, leaving nothing but silence and debt. I remember the smell of burnt coffee in that tiny kitchen when I realized his entire closet was empty. I remember the rough texture of my uniform's apron as I dried my tears before waking the children. I couldn't fall apart. I didn't have that privilege. Ethan was my confessed weakness. He was born premature, with lungs as fragile as tissue paper. I spent entire nights next to his hospital crib, watching his tiny chest fight for every breath. The doctors said he might not make it, but he did, and I made a silent pact with life. I would do whatever it took for that boy to have everything I never had. I worked double shifts for years. I'd leave home when it was still dark and return after dark. My feet would swell inside my standard-issue white shoes until every step was a stab of pain. My back creaked like old wood under the weight of patients who needed to be moved, bathed, fed. But every 2 weeks, when I got my paycheck, the first thing I did was set aside money for Ethan's medications, his clothes, his school supplies. There were never any luxuries in our house. The TV was secondhand, bought at a flea market. The furniture was inherited or rescued from the curb and restored with my own hands on Sundays. But they never, ever lacked food on the table or love in my words. Every night, no matter how exhausted I was, I sat with them for dinner. I asked about their day. I helped them with their homework under the yellowish light of a flickering bulb. Ethan used to say the most beautiful things to me when he was a boy. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a house on the lake," he'd promise while I gave him his nightly nebulizer treatments. "You'll have a big room with huge windows, and we'll watch the water every day." I would stroke his dark hair, still damp from his bath, and I believed him. With all my soul, I believed him. The years passed. Ethan grew up to be a handsome man, with my same straight nose and his father's eyes. He studied business administration, thanks to scholarships I fought for and sacrifices he never knew the details of. Getting those scholarships meant begging, filling out endless forms, visiting government offices where I was treated with disdain for being a simple nurse who dared to dream of college for her son. When he met Jessica, I wanted to believe she was the right woman for him. She was pretty, educated, from a family with a better economic standing than ours. She worked in a boutique downtown and always smelled of expensive perfume. But from the first day he brought her home, I felt something strange in the way she looked at me. Her eyes scanned our modest living room, lingering on the cracks in the ceiling, the faded sofa, the curtains I had sewn myself with fabric from the discount store. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her expression said it all. At their wedding 7 years ago, I danced the traditional mother-son dance with Ethan. He whispered in my ear, "Thanks for everything, Mom. I'll never forget what you did for me." I cried. I cried because I thought those words were a promise. A guarantee that the love I had sown for decades would finally bear fruit in the form of reciprocity and care. 3 years later, when they decided to buy a house, I had just sold my only property. It was a small condo I had bought with my retirement package when I took early retirement for health reasons. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen where only 2 people could barely fit. But it was mine. My name was on the deed. It was the only time in my life I had ever truly owned something. Ethan arrived one afternoon with Jessica. They sat in my living room and explained they had found the perfect house in a new suburban development. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a yard, a garage. But the down payment was very high, and the banks wouldn't give them the full loan they needed. "Mom," Ethan said, taking my hand with that smile that had melted me since he was a sickly baby. If you help us with the down payment, I promise you'll have your own room in the house. You'll live with us. You won't have to pay rent or worry about anything anymore. Jessica nodded with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Yes, Evelyn. It'll be like your own house. Better, actually. I wanted to believe them. God knows how much I wanted to believe them. But something in my stomach twisted with distrust. I had learned, over years of watching families fall apart in hospital hallways, that promises made over money were rarely kept. I need to think about it, I told them. Ethan's face changed. It hardened in a way I had never seen before. Think about it? Mom, I'm your son. Don't you trust me? For the next 3 weeks, he called me every day. Sometimes he would cry on the phone. Other times, Jessica would take the receiver and speak to me in a sweet but firm voice about once-in-a-lifetime opportunities and how important family is. One time, Ethan showed up at my rental unannounced, with Jessica 6 months pregnant, and told me that if I didn't help them, their baby would be born in a dangerous apartment where the neighbors had already been robbed twice. I caved, as I always did when it came to him. I sold my condo for less than it was worth because I needed the money fast. The day I signed the deed of sale, I felt like I was handing over a piece of my soul. That condo represented my independence, my security, my refuge for old age. I gave Ethan $60,000 for the down payment, almost everything I had received from the sale. I was left with just $10,000 for my own expenses. Thanks, Mom, he said, hugging me tightly. I'll pay you back, I swear. And you'll have your room in the new house. But I insisted on something. I asked Ethan for us to go to a lawyer and sign a document stating that I had contributed that amount to the purchase of the house. My good friend Rosemary, who had worked for years as a legal secretary, had advised me, Evelyn, a contract speaks louder than a promise. Protect yourself. Ethan didn't want to. Mom, don't you trust me? He asked with a wounded voice, as if I were the one doing something wrong. Jessica crossed her arms and sighed impatiently. Evelyn, this is disrespectful. We're family, not strangers. But I stood firm. For the first time in years, something inside me refused to give in completely. Either we sign the document or there's no money, I told them, my voice trembling but determined. They needed the money urgently. The opportunity for the house was slipping away. So they agreed. Although during the entire process at the lawyer's office, Jessica never stopped whispering comments to Ethan about distrustful old women and controlling mothers. The lawyer, an older man with thick glasses named Mr. Campbell, looked at me with something akin to understanding as he explained that the document gave me legal rights to a proportional share of the property. Keep this copy safe, ma'am, he said in a low voice as he handed me the manila folder with the papers. And if you ever need advice, here's my card. I tucked both away in the bottom of my purse as if they were treasures. I didn't know then that this piece of paper would be my only salvation years later. They moved into the new house in March. It was beautiful, I'll admit. Freshly painted white walls, shiny ceramic floors, a small but well-kept garden. When I went to visit them for the first time, I brought flowers and a chocolate fudge cake I had made from my grandmother's recipe. Ethan greeted me with a quick hug, but his attention was on hanging a huge painting in the living room. Mom, isn't the house gorgeous? He asked with pride. It's beautiful, sweetie. And my room? Which one will it be? There was an uncomfortable silence. Jessica appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Oh, Evelyn, about that. We decided to use all the rooms. One is ours, another is for April, and we turned the third into a home office for Ethan. But don't worry, when you come to visit, you can stay on the living room sofa. It's very comfortable. I felt like I had been slapped. The sofa? But Ethan, you promised me. Mom? Things changed. He interrupted, without even looking me in the eye. We just need the space. But you'll always be welcome here. That doesn't change. Welcome. Like a guest. Like someone tolerated out of politeness. I left that house with a broken heart and the untouched cake in my hands because no one had even tried it. I returned to my rented room, a damp space in a rundown apartment building downtown where the walls had mold and the shower only had hot water 2 hours a day. It was all I could afford on my retirement pension and the small jobs I did caring for elderly neighbors. The months went on. The visits grew further and further apart. I called Ethan every week, but he rarely answered. When he did, he was always in a hurry. "Mom, I'm busy. I'll call you later." That later never came. I tried to get close to my granddaughter, April. I sent her little handmade gifts. Rag dolls I sewed at night. Sweaters knitted with cheap yarn but filled with love. Jessica would receive them with a forced smile and say, "Thank you, Evelyn." But I later found out from a neighbor that many of those gifts ended up in the trash because they looked cheap. That phrase got back to me indirectly, but it hurt as if it had been screamed in my face. A full year passed without them inviting me to any celebrations. Not April's birthday, not Christmas, not New Year's. I spent the holidays alone in my room, eating a sandwich and watching out the window as the families in the neighborhood gathered, laughed, and toasted. I wondered what I had done wrong. I wondered if I had been a bad mother, if I had failed in some fundamental way that I couldn't see. One January morning, on my 69th birthday, I woke up with the absurd hope that Ethan would remember. I checked my phone every 5 minutes all morning. Nothing. Not a call, not a text. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore, and I called him. "Hello?" he answered, his voice annoyed. "Honey, it's me, your mom." "Oh, Mom. What's up? I'm in a meeting. It's my birthday today." Silence on the other end. A silence so long and heavy that I felt my eyes well up with tears. "Oh, right. Happy birthday. Hey, I gotta go. We'll talk later." He hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried like I hadn't cried since my own mother's funeral. I cried for all the nights I had stayed up with him when he had a fever. I cried for all the times I had worked sick just so I could pay for his medicine. I cried for the wedding ring I sold to buy him his first computer when he started college. I cried for the woman I had been, and who was now invisible even to her own son. That night, I ate a slice of store-bought cake by myself, with a single birthday candle I had bought for myself at the corner store. I lit it, made a wish I already knew wouldn't come true, and blew it out as tears fell onto the disposable plastic plate. 2 months later, in March, I received a call from Ethan that filled me with hope. "Mom, we want to invite you to April's birthday party. It's going to be on Saturday at the house, at 4 in the afternoon." My heart leaped with joy. "Oh, honey, thank you so much. I'll be there. What can I bring?" "No, don't worry about it. Just you being here is enough." But I couldn't arrive empty-handed. April was turning 5, and I wanted to make her something special. Something that would show her that her grandmother loved her, even if we barely saw each other. I decided to make my famous chocolate fudge cake, the same one I had made for Ethan's birthdays when he was a boy, the one that made him jump for joy. I spent almost $30 on the ingredients, money I needed for other things, but I didn't care. I spent all of Friday afternoon preparing it with all my love. I beat the eggs by hand because my electric mixer had broken years ago. I made the fudge frosting with the exact ratio my grandmother had taught me. I decorated it with fresh strawberries I bought at the market, forming the number 5 in the center. On Saturday, I got ready in my best clothes. A blue dress that had been my special occasion uniform for years, nylon stockings without any runs, and my low-heeled black shoes that pinched my feet, but made me feel elegant. I put on the embroidered cardigan with flowers that my sister Susan had given me before she died of cancer. It was my way of taking her with me to important places. I carefully applied my makeup, using the pale pink lipstick I saved for special occasions. I styled my gray hair into a tight bun. When I looked in the mirror, I thought I looked presentable. I thought that maybe, just maybe, Ethan would notice that his mother had made an effort, that she was still a woman worthy of respect and affection. I took 2 buses to get to their neighborhood. The cake sat on my lap, inside a cardboard box that I held carefully during the entire 40-minute journey. Every pothole made me tremble with fear that it would be ruined. When I got to the front door, I could hear music and laughter from inside. I rang the bell with my heart pounding. Ethan opened it, looked me up and down with an expression I couldn't interpret, and said, "Hi, Mom," without a smile, without a hug. I walked in. The house was full of people I didn't know. Young families with well-dressed children, women with designer bags, men with expensive watches. Pastel-colored balloons decorated every corner, and there was a long table laden with gourmet food that had clearly been catered. Fancy appetizers, imported cheese platters, bottles of wine that cost more than I earned in a week. I stood frozen in the entryway, holding my cardboard box with the homemade cake, feeling completely out of place. My blue dress, which had seemed so elegant that morning, now looked worn and old-fashioned compared to the modern outfits of the other women. My embroidered cardigan seemed like a historical costume in the midst of all these fashionable people. No one came over to greet me. No one asked how I was. They didn't even look at me. I walked to the kitchen with my cake, looking for a place to put it. Jessica was there, arranging champagne glasses on a tray. When she saw me, her expression changed. A mixture of annoyance and contempt that she tried to hide with a fake smile. "Oh, Evelyn, you brought a cake." "Yes, it's chocolate fudge. Ethan's favorite when he was a boy. I thought April might like it." Jessica took the box without looking at me and placed it in a corner of the counter, behind other things. "How nice. We already have the main cake, but thank you." Her tone made it clear that my cake was an inconvenience, something she hadn't asked for and didn't know what to do with. "Where's April? I'd like to wish her a happy birthday. She's busy with her little friends. Better not to bother her right now." I left the kitchen with a lump in my throat. I stood in a corner of the living room, watching everyone mingle, laugh, take pictures. Ethan passed by me several times without stopping, always busy attending to his guests, serving drinks, telling jokes that made everyone laugh except for me, who wasn't close enough to hear them. I looked for a place to sit. All the armchairs in the living room were occupied by guests chatting animatedly. I approached the main sofa, where there was a small space next to Jessica, who was talking with 3 other elegant women about boutiques and spas I didn't even know existed. I sat down carefully, trying not to interrupt their conversation. For a moment, I thought maybe I could join in, say something, be part of the circle, if only for politeness' sake. But then Jessica leaned toward me without turning to look at me, barely moving her lips, and in a voice so low that only I could hear, she whispered, "Don't sit next to me. You smell like old people." The world stopped. My heart stopped beating for a full second. I felt all the blood drain from my face. My hands started to tremble in my lap. I couldn't react. I couldn't defend myself. I couldn't even fully process what I had just heard. I just felt a wave of humiliation so deep, so devastating that it took my breath away. I stood up in silence. No one noticed. Jessica continued her conversation as if nothing had happened, laughing at something one of her friends had said about a very expensive facial treatment. I walked to the backyard with mechanical steps, as if my body were moving on its own while my mind was still trapped in those 5 poisoned words. I found a white plastic chair by the garden fence, far from everyone, half hidden behind some large potted plants. I sat there and remained motionless, staring into space. From my corner, I could see everything. I could see Ethan lifting April and singing "Happy Birthday" to her. I could see Jessica cutting a huge, professionally decorated 2-tiered cake with fondant and princess figurines. I could see everyone clapping and taking family photos that I was not a part of. No one came looking for me. No one asked where the grandmother was. Not even April, who at one point ran near where I was sitting chasing a balloon, recognized me. She looked at me as if I were part of the garden furniture. The hours passed. The sun began to set. People started to say their goodbyes. Whole families left through the door with goodie bags and pieces of cake wrapped in decorated napkins. I was still in my plastic chair, invisible, forgotten. It was then that I heard voices coming from the kitchen. The window was slightly open, and the voices carried clearly into the yard. I recognized Jessica's voice talking to another woman. "And your mother-in-law?" I saw she arrived earlier. Jessica's laugh was like a knife. "Oh, yeah. She's around here somewhere. My mother-in-law thinks she still matters. I don't know how to tell her she doesn't have a place here anymore. Ethan is past that stage of his life, you know? He doesn't need her hovering over him like when he was a kid. But she's his mom. Yeah, but she's just so... I don't know how to say it without being mean. She's just so country, you know? Always bringing homemade stuff no one wants to eat. Her clothes smell musty, and she talks about things no one wants to hear, just sad stories from when my husband was poor. It's embarrassing in front of our friends. The other woman gave an uncomfortable laugh. Well, but she's April's grandmother. Yeah, and that's why we invite her. But that's it. We've done our part. I'm not going to beg her to stay or to come over more often. We did enough by letting her in. Letting her in. As if I were a stranger? As if I weren't the woman who had sold her only property so they could buy the very house where they now despised me. Something broke inside me in that moment. It wasn't my heart, because that would imply something clean, something that shatters all at once. It was something much deeper and more painful. It was the last shred of hope I had been holding on to, the last illusion that my son would one day remember who had raised him, who had sacrificed everything for him. I got up from the chair, my legs numb. I went into the house through the side door that led to the garage, avoiding the area where everyone was. I went straight to the kitchen, where my cake was still in the same corner where Jessica had left it, unopened, untasted, completely ignored, while the professional cake had been devoured down to the last crumb. I took my cardboard box. No one saw me. No one stopped me. I walked out the front door without saying goodbye to anyone. Ethan was in the living room, showing a friend his new big-screen TV. I passed right by him. He didn't turn around. He didn't say, "You're leaving, Mom?" or "Thanks for coming," or anything. I walked the 4 blocks to the bus stop with my untouched cake in my hands. Every step hurt, not from physical exhaustion, but from something much worse. From the terrible realization that I had raised a son who saw me as an embarrassing burden. On the bus ride back, an older woman sat next to me and asked if I was going to a party. She looked at the cake box on my lap with kind curiosity. "No," I told her, my voice breaking. "I'm coming from one." I couldn't say more. If I opened my mouth to explain, I knew I would fall apart right there, in front of all the passengers. I got to my room after dark. I left the cake on the rickety little table that served as my dining area. I took off the shoes that had been hurting my feet for hours. I took off the embroidered cardigan from my dead sister and folded it carefully, as if it were the most valuable thing I owned. Maybe it was. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the cracked wall in front of me. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for this. I just felt an immense emptiness, an absence of everything, of hope, of purpose, of a reason to keep trying. "You smell like old people." The words replayed in my mind, over and over, like a broken record. I got up and went to the small cracked mirror hanging by the sink. I looked at myself closely. Did I smell bad? I sniffed my cardigan, my skin, my hair. All I could smell was the cheap soap I used and a little of the perfume I'd put on that morning. Was that what she called smelling like old people? Or did I simply smell of poverty, of the dampness of a rundown apartment, of a woman who could no longer afford the creams and perfumes the women in her circle used? I undressed and got into the shower, under the lukewarm water that barely trickled from the rusty shower head. I scrubbed my skin hard, as if I could wash away not just the dirt, but also the humiliation, the contempt, the invisibility. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, I couldn't get rid of the feeling of being trash that someone had forgotten to sweep up. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the building, a couple yelling in the apartment below, a baby crying on the other side of the wall, someone stumbling home drunk down the hallway. Every sound reminded me of where I was, how far I had fallen, how alone I was. I thought of all the times I had given something up for Ethan, the time I was offered a better-paying job in Chicago, but didn't take it because he was in high school, and I didn't want to pull him away from his friends. The time I had the chance to go on a trip to Florida with the other nurses from the hospital, but used the money for his graduation expenses instead. The time a good man, a widower who worked in maintenance at the hospital, repeatedly asked me out, but I always said no because my son needs me. All for a son who now allowed his wife to humiliate me in his own home, who left me sitting alone in a plastic chair as if I were a homeless person who had crashed the party. 2 weeks passed without a call from Ethan. 2 weeks in which I checked my phone every hour, hoping he would at least ask if I had gotten home safely, if I was okay, anything. But there was nothing. The silence was deafening. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Ethan. My heart leaped with relief. Maybe he had come to his senses. Maybe he was going to apologize. Maybe he had noticed how I was treated and wanted to make things right. "Hello?" I answered, my voice hopeful. "Hey, Mom." His tone was casual, unconcerned. "Jessica and I are thinking about trading in the SUV. We found a new Grand Cherokee, it's incredible. But we need about $15,000 for the down payment. Could you lend us something? You're not spending much, are you?" I was frozen. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling to ask how I felt after the party. He wasn't calling because he missed me or cared. He was calling for money. "Ethan, I don't have any money. My pension barely covers rent and food." "Oh, Mom, don't be like that. I know you have savings. It's just a loan. We'll pay you back in small installments." Something inside me hardened. And what if I need something? What if I get sick? What if I have an emergency? There was a sigh of impatience on the other end. "Mom, please don't start with your drama. It's always the same with you. Everything has to be complicated. Everything has to be a problem. I'm just asking you to help your son. Or do you not care about me anymore?" My voice broke. "Do I not care about you? Ethan, I sold my home for you. I worked double shifts for years for you. I stayed single for you. And you ask me if I care about you. Exactly. So help me. It's the least you can do after everything you did wrong when I was a kid." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. Everything I did wrong? Yeah, Mom. Don't play dumb. You were always so controlling, always hovering over me. That's why it was so hard for me to become independent. That's why my therapist said I have boundary issues. I was speechless. Therapy? They had told him I was the problem? The years I spent sleepless, caring for him when he was sick, were controlling? Sacrificing my own life so he could have opportunities was having boundary issues? "I don't have the money," I repeated, my voice shaking. "Whatever, Mom. But don't come crying to us later that we don't include you. You're the one pushing yourself away from the family by being so stubborn." And he hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand as if it were a foreign object. The tears finally came, not from sadness, but from rage. Rage at myself for being so naive, so stupid, so blind. Rage for having believed that love was enough, that sacrifices were remembered, that blood meant something. The following days were the darkest of my life. I barely ate. I barely slept. I only got up because my body forced me to go to the bathroom. The chocolate fudge cake was still in its box on the table, untouched, slowly rotting like my life. One night, as the clock struck 3 in the morning and I was lying awake, I made a decision. I got up, turned on the dim light of the bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and searched in the back of my closet for the shoebox where I kept my important documents. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. Inside were my birth certificate, my nursing degree, my service awards from the hospital, old photographs, and the manila folder from the lawyer with the co-ownership document for Ethan's house. I took it out with trembling hands. I read the whole thing, word for word, though I barely understood all the legal jargon. But I understood enough. I understood that I had rights to that house, that my $60,000 contribution gave me a legal percentage of ownership, that they couldn't just enjoy that asset while treating me like trash. I searched through the papers until I found the card the lawyer had given me that day. Mr. Ernest Campbell, attorney at law. I held it between my fingers for a long time, debating with myself. Was I really considering this? Was I really going to take legal action against my own son? But then I remembered Jessica's poisonous whisper. I remembered Ethan walking past me without a glance. I remembered the phone call asking for money without asking how I was. I remembered years and years of giving and giving and giving and receiving nothing but contempt in return. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. The next morning, at 9 o'clock sharp when the offices opened, I called Mr. Campbell. My voice was shaking so much I had to repeat my name twice. He remembered me immediately. "Mrs. Miller, how are you? How can I help you?" I told him everything. I couldn't help it. The words poured out like a flooding river. I told him about the party, the humiliation, the call for money, about how they had promised me a room and now treated me like an annoying stranger. He listened in silence. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Mrs. Miller," he finally said in a serious voice, "I understand your pain, and I'm very sorry you're going through this. Legally, you have rights to that property. You can exercise them. What does that mean? It means you can demand the sale of the property to recover your investment, or you can request that they pay you the equivalent of your share percentage. With the $60,000 you contributed 3 years ago, plus the appreciation the property has gained, we'd be talking about approximately $85,000 that you are owed. The figure took my breath away. It was almost everything I had lost, and then some. But he's my son, I whispered. If I do this, he'll never forgive me. The lawyer sighed. Ma'am, with all due respect, do you think things will get better if you do nothing? Do you believe they will one day acknowledge what you sacrificed for them? I didn't answer because I knew the answer. No, nothing was ever going to change. I could keep accepting crumbs of affection, keep begging for a little attention, keep being invisible in my own family. Or I could, for the first time in my life, choose myself. What do I have to do? I asked, my voice barely audible. Come to my office, bring the original document, and we'll start the legal process. 3 days later, I was sitting across from Mr. Campbell's desk, signing papers I never imagined I would have to sign. He had reviewed everything carefully and explained that because Ethan had not fulfilled the verbal agreement to provide me with a room, and given that I was a legal co-owner, I had the right to demand the liquidation of my share or the sale of the property. This is going to take time, he warned me, and it's going to be painful. Your son will react badly. They will probably try to negotiate, to manipulate you emotionally. You have to be prepared. I nodded, though inside I was terrified. I don't want to leave them on the street, I said. I just want them to understand they can't treat me this way. I understand. We will give them the option to buy out your share. If they can't or won't, then we would have to proceed with the sale of the property. I signed everything. Leaving that office, I felt something strange. It wasn't relief exactly, nor was it guilt. It was something like when you take off a shoe that has been hurting you for hours. It hurts to take it off, but it hurts more to keep wearing it. 2 weeks passed before Ethan received the legal notice. I knew it was coming because the lawyer had informed me it had been sent. But still, when my phone rang at 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, I wasn't prepared for the storm. What the hell did you do? Ethan screamed without even a hello. His voice was filled with a rage I had never heard from him. You're suing us? Your own family? I remained silent, clutching the phone so tightly my fingers ached. Do you know what we got today? Do you? A damn legal document saying we have to pay you almost $85,000 or sell the house. Are you crazy? Have you lost your mind? Ethan, I just want what's mine. What's yours? It was a gift. It was a mother helping her son. You can't just come and collect on it now like you're some bank. It wasn't a gift. It was an investment we made together. It's in the document we signed. That document you forced us to sign. I knew you'd do this someday. I knew you'd use that against us. My voice came out firmer than I expected. No one forced you to do anything. You needed the money. I provided it. And you promised me a place in that house. We gave you a place. You were always welcome. Welcome? Ethan, at your daughter's birthday party, your wife told me I smelled bad and not to sit next to her. No one spoke to me. No one included me. You treated me like I was garbage. You're exaggerating. Jessica would never do that. She did, and you let her. You were there and you never once looked at me. Because there were a lot of people, Mom. I can't be looking after you like you're a little kid. You're a grown woman. You have to understand that we have our own lives. I understand perfectly, I said, and I felt something inside me harden like cement. That's why I'm reclaiming what's mine, so I can have my own life too. You're selfish. A selfish, resentful old woman. You spent my entire childhood playing the martyr, reminding me of everything you sacrificed for me. And now you're coming to cash in on it. You know what? My therapist was right. You are a toxic mother. Those words cut deeper than any of Jessica's insults. A toxic mother. For having worked until my back was broken to feed him. For having sold my few possessions to pay for his education. For having given up my own life so he could have a better one. If that's what you think of me, I said, my voice breaking, then there's nothing more to talk about. My lawyers will be in contact with you. Wait. His tone changed abruptly. It went from fury to something like panic. Don't hang up. Look, we can fix this. It doesn't have to come to this. It already has, Ethan. How much do you want? Give me a reasonable number and we'll pay you in installments. It's not about how much I want. It's about respect. We'll respect you, I swear. Come to the house whenever you want. We can even fix up the office for you to stay in. See? We're willing to keep our promise. Now that there's a legal document involved? Now that you're forced to? Mom, please, think about April. She's your granddaughter. If you do this, you'll never see her again. There it was. The threat I knew would come. The card they always play when they run out of arguments. Grandchildren as emotional hostages. April doesn't recognize me, Ethan. On her birthday, she looked at me like I was a stranger. You two already made sure to erase me from her life. Because you never come over. Because you're the one who pulled away. You left me alone in a plastic chair in the yard for 3 hours. No one talked to me. No one included me in the family photos. And I'm the one who pulled away? There was a long silence. I heard voices in the background. Jessica was saying something I couldn't understand, but her tone was sharp, hysterical. My wife says you've always been dramatic, that you always exaggerate things to get attention. And what do you say, Ethan? What do you think? Or does she think for you too? Don't be ridiculous. Tell me one thing. My voice came out tired. Do you remember my birthday this year? Silence. I called you that day. I told you it was my birthday. You said, "Oh, right, happy birthday," and hung up because you were in a meeting. Do you remember? More silence. I spent my 69th birthday alone, eating a piece of cake with a candle I bought for myself. And you know what the worst part is, Ethan? I wasn't even surprised, because I had already gotten used to you not remembering. Mom, do what you have to do at the house. Pay me, don't pay me, sell it, don't sell it. But don't call me anymore just when you need something. I can't take it anymore. The months passed. I started making real friends. Patricia from the support group invited me to her house for dinner. Carla from the painting workshop asked me to go to the movies with her. I met Mr. Manuel, a 72-year-old widower who lived in the apartment below and who greeted me with a genuine smile every morning when we met on the stairs. "Good morning, Evelyn. Have you had breakfast yet?" It was a simple question, but it meant someone cared about me, that someone noticed my existence. One day, Mr. Manuel knocked on my door with a container of chili he had made. I made way too much for just me. Would you do me the honor of taking some? We ate together in my small dining area. He told me about his wife, who had passed away 5 years ago from cancer. About his 3 children who lived out of state and called him every Sunday without fail. About the loneliness he sometimes felt, but also about the peace he had found in the simplicity of his days. "You know what the hardest part of getting old is?" he asked me as he served more chili onto my plate. "It's not the aching body or the failing memory. It's realizing that the people you loved the most can be the ones who hurt you the most, and learning to be okay in spite of that." He was right. And I was learning. I turned 70 in my new apartment, surrounded by my friends from the painting workshop. Carla brought a cake. Patricia brought wine. Rosa made a lasagna. We laughed, we toasted, we told stories. For the first time in decades, my birthday wasn't a day of loneliness and tears, but of genuine celebration. "To Evelyn," Patricia said, raising her glass. "To the bravest woman I know. To the one who dared to choose herself when no one else would." We all cried, but they were sweet tears. The tears of women who had survived storms and could now appreciate the calm. The year passed faster than I expected. I filled my days with activities that made me happy. Painting on Mondays and Thursdays. Support group on Tuesdays. Morning walks in the park. Afternoons reading on my balcony. Sometimes I had dinner with Mr. Manuel, who had become a close friend. Someone I could talk to about anything without being judged. I stopped checking social media for information about Ethan and Jessica. I stopped torturing myself wondering how April was. I learned that letting go didn't mean ceasing to love, but ceasing to allow that love to destroy me. One day, while I was painting a mountain landscape in my class, Carla came over to see my work. "Evelyn, you've improved so much. This is beautiful." I looked at my canvas. It was true. The brushstrokes were more confident, the colors more vibrant, the composition more balanced. I had learned to create beauty with my own hands. I think I'm finally learning to see things differently, I told her. Not just things, Carla replied with a smile. Yourself, too. The 2 years of the no-contact agreement were almost up. 3 months to go. 3 months and I could legally try to contact April again. 3 months and I could call Ethan if I chose to. But a strange thing was happening. I no longer felt that desperation to do it. I no longer woke up counting down the days. I had built a life that had meaning without them. It wasn't that I had stopped loving them. It was that I had learned to love myself more. One September afternoon, 2 months before the deadline, I was watering the plants on my balcony when I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Small, hurried footsteps, followed by a voice that made my heart stop. Grandma? Grandma Evelyn? I turned around so fast I almost dropped the watering can. And there she was, April. But she was no longer the 5-year-old girl I had last seen. She was now 7, almost 8. She was taller. Her face had lost its babyish roundness. She was wearing a school uniform and a huge backpack. And she was alone. April? What are you doing here? Where are your parents? She ran to me and hugged me with such force she nearly knocked me over. I found you. I've been looking for you for months. I asked Mrs. Patricia from the church group and she told me where you lived. Please don't tell anyone. I sat her down in my living room, poured her a glass of water with trembling hands, trying to process what was happening. If anyone found out about this, I could be accused of violating the no-contact agreement, even though I hadn't initiated this encounter. Honey, how did you get here? Do your parents know where you are? I skipped school again. I told them I had dance practice, but I really took 2 buses to get here. Grandma, I have to talk to you. I have to tell you something very important. Her eyes filled with tears. Mom and Dad are getting a divorce. The world stood still. What? Yeah. They fight all the time. Dad says it's all Mom's fault, that he lost his job because of her stupid videos. Mom says Dad is an ungrateful loser who never valued what she did for him. And I just want them to be quiet. Tears streamed down her cheeks. This 7-year-old girl was living through the collapse of her family and had no one to talk to about it. And then I remembered you, she continued between sobs. I remembered how you hugged me that one time. I remembered the cake you made just for me even though nobody else wanted it. And I thought that maybe you would listen to me. I held her as she cried on my shoulder. My granddaughter, the one I was forbidden to see, had crossed half the city alone to find me because I was the only stable thing she could remember in the midst of her chaotic life. I will always listen to you, my darling. Always. I called Ethan. I had no choice. April was in my home and he needed to know she was safe. The phone rang 5 times before he answered. What do you want? His voice sounded tired, defeated. Ethan, April is with me. She's okay. She came here by herself to find me. There was a long silence, and then I heard something I never thought I would hear. My son breaking down and crying on the other end of the line. I haven't been able to find her for 3 hours. I called the school, her friends, everyone. I thought something terrible had happened to her. His voice broke completely. I'm on my way. He arrived 30 minutes later. When I opened the door, I was shocked by what I saw. Ethan had aged 10 years in the 2 that we hadn't seen each other. He had deep dark circles under his eyes. He had lost weight. His clothes were wrinkled as if he had slept in them. He was no longer the polished, arrogant man I once knew. He was someone completely broken. April ran to him. Daddy, I'm sorry, but I needed to see Grandma. Ethan hugged her desperately, as if he had just recovered the only thing that mattered to him in the world. Then he looked at me over April's head. His eyes were red and swollen. Thank you for calling me, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Thank you for taking care of her. I will always take care of her. She's my granddaughter. We stood there in the doorway of my apartment. An uncomfortable silence between us as April continued to cling to her father. Do you want to come in? I finally asked. We can talk. He walked in slowly, looking around my small apartment with an expression I couldn't read. He sat on my modest sofa while April settled between us. Nice place, he said without meeting my eyes. It seems peaceful. It is. Another silence. April looked back and forth between us, waiting for one of us to say something more. Mom, Ethan began, but his voice broke. He put his hands to his face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared for that. For 2 years, I had imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways. In some fantasies, he arrived full of remorse and I forgave him immediately. In others, I screamed at him everything I had held back, and he finally understood the pain he had caused me. But the reality was different. The reality was this broken man in front of me, crying like a child, and I didn't know what to feel. You were right about everything," he continued through his sobs. "Jessica, she only wanted me for the money, for the image. When the videos went viral and people started criticizing her, she lost her job at the boutique. Then she lost her social media contracts. She became furious. She said it was all your fault, that you had ruined her life." He wiped his tears with the back of his hand, just as he did when he was a boy and would fall in the park. "We started fighting all the time. Over money, because she wanted us to sue the journalist who defended you. Because I started to question if we had really done the right thing. And 3 months ago, she told me she wanted a divorce. That being married to someone whose family was a public disaster wasn't working for her anymore." April hid her face in my arm. I could feel her trembling. "She left me, Mom. She took half of everything and left." And I was left alone with April, trying to figure out at what point my life turned into this nightmare. I wanted to feel satisfaction. I wanted to feel that justice had finally been served. But all I felt was sadness. Sadness for this man who was my son, who had made terrible choices and was now paying the consequences. "And your job?" I asked. "I lost that too. When the videos went viral, some of our clients started canceling contracts. They said they didn't want to do business with someone so controversial. The company let me go 6 months ago. And how are you surviving?" "With what's left of the savings. I sold the SUV. I'm looking for a job, but it's hard. My name still comes up in internet searches linked to all that controversy." He paused. "Jessica's parents cut us off too. They said we were a bad influence on their family. Karma had done its job, but seeing it brought me no joy." "Ethan, why did you treat me like that?" I finally asked the question I had held inside for years. What did I do to deserve that humiliation? He covered his face with his hands. "Nothing. You did nothing wrong. I let Jessica convince me that you were a burden. She said your clothes were musty, that your manners were small town, that you were an embarrassment in front of her friends. And I, like an idiot, believed her. I started seeing you through her eyes instead of my own. I sold my home for you. I know. I worked until my health was ruined for you. I know. I loved you more than anything in this world. I know." His voice was barely a whisper, and I threw it all away because I wanted to fit into a world that was never mine, because I was ashamed of where I came from, because I was a terrible son who didn't value the only person who truly loved me. April started to cry silently. "Grandma, can you forgive my dad? Please. We already lost Mom. I don't want to lose you too." I looked at this beautiful child who was not to blame for anything, who just wanted a family that worked. Then I looked at Ethan, at the broken man who was once my sickly baby, the one I watched over for endless nights, the one I loved before he took his first breath. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now," I said honestly. "You hurt me too much. I spent 2 years rebuilding myself, learning to live without expecting anything from you. I can't just erase that because you're sorry now." Ethan nodded, accepting my words as the punishment he probably felt he deserved. "But," I continued, "I can try, little by little. If you are truly willing to change, if you truly understand what you did, then maybe over time we can rebuild something. Not what we had before, because that's dead, but maybe something new." "Really?" he asked, his eyes full of hope. "For her," I said, pointing to April. "And because despite everything you are still my son. And because I learned that holding on to resentment only hurts me." Ethan knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. "I promise I'll be better. I will show you every single day that I deserve another chance. I will." "Don't promise me anything," I interrupted. "Just show me. Promises don't mean anything to me anymore. Only actions." They stayed for dinner. I prepared something simple with what I had in the kitchen. As I cooked, April helped me set the table, and Ethan watched from the dining area with a nostalgic expression. "Do you remember when I used to help you cook?" he asked. "When I was a kid and you'd come home tired from the hospital, but you'd still make dinner and let me stir the pots." I remember. I was happy then, and I didn't even know it. During dinner, we talked about simple things. April told me about school, her friends, her favorite class, which was art. Ethan asked me about my life, about my apartment, about what I had been doing. I told him about the painting workshop, my friends, about Mr. Manuel. "Don Manuel?" Ethan asked, in a tone that almost sounded jealous. "A friend, a widower who lives downstairs. He's a good person." Something changed in Ethan's expression, as if he finally understood that I had built a life without him, that I was no longer the desperate mother waiting for his scraps of attention. I was a woman complete within herself. When they left that night, April hugged me tightly. "Can I come visit again? Without skipping school this time?" "Whenever you want, honey. This will always be your home." Ethan stood at the door. "Mom, can I call you? Every once in a while?" "You can try. But if I start to feel like you're only reaching out when you need something, I'm going to cut contact again. I've learned to set boundaries." "I understand. And that's fair." I watched them go down the stairs. April turned around 3 times to wave goodbye. Ethan never turned around, but I saw his shoulders shake. He was still crying. I closed the door to my apartment and stood there for a long time. I didn't feel the euphoria of the reunion I had imagined, nor did I feel the devastating pain of before. I felt something like peace, like acceptance. Maybe someday we could have a healthy relationship, or maybe not. But I was no longer dependent on that to be happy. 6 months passed after that unexpected encounter. Ethan kept his word in a way I never imagined possible. He called me every Sunday morning, not to ask for anything, but just to ask how I was doing. He sent me photos of April at her school activities. He invited me to their new apartment, much more modest than the house they had lost, but clean and full of April's drawings on the walls. "It's all we can afford with my new job," he explained when I went to visit them for the first time. "I'm an accountant at a small company. I don't earn what I used to, but it's honest work, and it's enough for the 2 of us." The apartment had 2 small bedrooms, a living dining room, a basic kitchen. Nothing luxurious, nothing to impress anyone, but there was something different about the atmosphere. There was warmth. There were pictures of April everywhere. There was a sense of home that the big house never had. "You know what's the strangest thing?" he said while he was making coffee in his modest kitchen. "I'm happier now than when I had everything. It's like all that time I was chasing something that didn't matter." April became a frequent visitor to my apartment. She would come on Saturday afternoons, and we would paint together. I taught her the techniques I had learned in my classes, and she created entire worlds with her paintbrushes. We had deep conversations that no 8-year-old should need to have, but that were necessary for healing. "Grandma, why do the people who are supposed to love us sometimes treat us badly?" "Because sometimes people get so lost in their own problems that they forget to see others. It's not an excuse, but it's an explanation." "And why did you forgive us if we treated you so badly?" I spent a long time pondering that question before answering. "I don't know if I completely forgave you, honey. It still hurts. It probably always will hurt a little. But I decided that I wasn't going to let that pain stop me from having a relationship with you. And with your dad, if he really changed. And did he change? He's trying. And that's the only thing I can ask of him." One spring afternoon, while I was watering my plants on the balcony, Mr. Manuel came up with a bouquet of wildflowers he had bought at the farmer's market. "To brighten your day, Evelyn." I smiled. Mr. Manuel had become more than a neighbor. He was a companion, someone with whom I shared quiet dinners, old movies, conversations about life and its unexpected turns. "Do you know what day it is today?" he asked me. "Thursday? It's the day I met you exactly 1 year ago, the day you moved into this building, and I want you to know that this has been the best year of my old age, thanks to your friendship." I blushed like a teenager. "Mr. Manuel, don't say those things." "Why not? It's the truth. Evelyn, at our age, there's no time to hold back the important things." He cleared his throat, nervous. "I'd like to invite you to dinner. A real dinner. At a restaurant. Like a date. My first reaction was to say no, that I was too old for such things, that I had already had my chance with love and had been hurt. But then I thought about everything I had learned in these past years. I thought about how I had denied myself so many things to put others first. I thought that I deserved to be happy. I'd love to, Mr. Manuel. His smile lit up his entire wrinkled face. Really? Well, I'll pick you up on Saturday at 7. And please, call me Manuel. No more, Mr. That night, I told my friends from the support group about the invitation. Rosa clapped like an excited child. You deserve it, Evelyn. After everything you've been through, you deserve someone to treat you like the queen you are. I don't know if I'm ready for this. No one is ever completely ready, said Patricia. But that's the beauty of starting over. You don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to dare. The date with Manuel was simple but perfect. We had dinner at a traditional Mexican restaurant. We talked for hours about our lives, our children, our mistakes, and our hopes. There were no pretensions, no games. Just two older people who had suffered and survived, finding comfort in each other's company. When he dropped me off at my apartment door, he kissed my hand with an old-fashioned gallantry. Thank you for a wonderful evening, Evelyn. Thank you. You, Manuel. I went up to my apartment floating. At 70 years old, I was having my first real date in decades. And I felt alive in a way I had forgotten was possible. The months continued to pass. My relationship with Ethan was gradually rebuilt, with more solid foundations this time. He stopped trying to impress me with material things and started showing me that he valued me in more meaningful ways. He asked for my opinion on important decisions. He included me in the plans with April. He called me when he was having a bad day, not for me to solve his problems, but just to vent. One Sunday, almost a year after our reunion, Ethan arrived at my apartment with a box of old photographs he had found in storage. I want April to know your whole story, he told me. Not the edited version that Jessica and I told her, the real version. I want her to know who you are and everything you did for me. We spent the afternoon together looking at photos. Me as a young woman in my nurse's uniform. Ethan as a baby in my arms at the hospital. His first steps. His birthdays. His graduation. Each photo came with a story that I had kept for years. And this one? April asked, pointing to a photo where I appeared very thin, with deep dark circles, but smiling next to a teenage Ethan. That was taken on the day of my high school graduation, Ethan explained with an emotional voice. Your grandma had worked triple shifts that week to be able to pay for my cap and gown. Look at her eyes. She was exhausted, but she came to my graduation and cried with pride when they handed me my diploma. You cried, Grandma? I cried like a fountain, I admitted, smiling, because my son, against all odds, had managed to graduate from high school, and I knew that was just the beginning of great things for him. Ethan took my hand. You were right, Mom. They were great things, although I got lost along the way trying to find them. On my 71st birthday, Ethan and April arrived early in the morning with a homemade cake that they had baked themselves. It was a little crooked, and the frosting wasn't perfectly distributed, but it was the most beautiful gift I had received in years. We did it together, April announced proudly. Daddy almost burned down the kitchen, but we made it. Later, my friends, Manuel, and even some of the neighbors from the building arrived. My small apartment filled with people who genuinely cared about me, who celebrated my existence not out of obligation, but out of real affection. While I was cutting the cake, surrounded by all these people who had come into my life after my biggest loss, I realized something fundamental. I had gained much more than I had lost. I had lost a house that was never really mine. I had lost a son who had to hit rock bottom to find his humanity. I had lost years living for others while forgetting about myself, but I had gained my freedom, my dignity, my peace. And I had gained the opportunity to build relationships based on mutual respect instead of family obligation. That night, when everyone left and I was alone in my apartment, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and looked at the stars. I thought about the Evelyn I was 3 years ago, broken, humiliated, invisible. And I thought about the Evelyn I was now, complete, valued, seen. The road had been painful. It had required courage I didn't know I had. It had meant letting go of people I loved in order to save myself. But I had made it. I had survived. More than that, I had flourished. And if anyone asked me if I would make the same decisions again, the answer would be yes. 1,000 times yes. Because I learned that self-love is not selfishness. That setting boundaries is not cruelty. That choosing yourself doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a free person. And now, finally, after 70 years, I was truly free. And you? Have you experienced something similar? Do you know someone who has had to choose themselves to survive? Tell me in the comments. Your story matters. And if this story touched your heart, if you felt for even a second that this could be your story, or the story of someone you love, please leave me a like and subscribe to the channel. I need this message to reach those who most need to hear it. To that person who feels invisible today. To the one who believes that choosing yourself is betraying your family. You are not alone, and you deserve to be happy. Until the next story.